The UES Magellan drifted silently through the void, its hull glinting in the light of an alien sun. Captain Anaya Sarkar stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen, as the ship approached the gleaming behemoth before them. It was a Zorak dreadnought, easily dwarfing the Magellan with its angular hull and bristling armaments. The Zorak were a spacefaring civilization humanity had encountered only weeks before, their ships appearing suddenly at the edges of explored space. Initial communications had been terse but nonviolent, and after a period of tense negotiation, the Zorak had agreed to a meeting on the border of their territory. Sarkar's heart raced as the Magellan came to a halt a respectful distance from the Zorak vessel. She had been entrusted with making peaceful first contact, and the weight of that responsibility hung heavy on her shoulders. "Hail them," she ordered, her voice steady despite her nerves. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Zorak ship. The aliens were tall and slender, their skin a mottled gray and their eyes a piercing violet. Their commander, a severe-looking individual with a network of scars across his angular face, regarded Sarkar with an air of disdain. "I am Commander Zorgax of the Zorak Empire," the alien spoke, his voice a guttural rasp. "You are the humans, yes. Your species is younger than we anticipated." Sarkar bristled at the condescension in Zorgax's tone, but maintained a diplomatic smile. "I am Captain Anaya Sarkar of the United Earth ship Magellan. We come in peace, seeking to establish diplomatic relations between our peoples." Zorgax made a noncommittal noise, his violet eyes scanning the Magellan dismissively. "Your ship is primitive. Your technology inferior. What could your species possibly offer the Zorak Empire?" Sarkar took a calming breath, refusing to rise to the bait. "Humanity has much to offer," she said evenly. "We are explorers, scientists, diplomats. We seek to learn and to share knowledge with all we encounter." The Zorak commander scoffed, a harsh sound that echoed across the comlink. "You are children playing at the feet of giants," he sneered. "The Zorak have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have no need for your knowledge." As the tense exchange continued, Sarkar could feel the first tendrils of unease curling in her gut. The Zorak were advanced, yes, but their arrogance and casual dismissal of humanity spoke of a dangerous superiority complex. This would be a difficult relationship to forge, she realized, and the path ahead was fraught with peril. But she was determined to try. For the sake of her crew, for the sake of Earth, she would find a way to make this work. She had to. Little did Sarkar know, the Zorak's disdain for humanity ran deeper than mere arrogance. In the heart of the Zorak Empire, a plan was already in motion, a plan that would test humanity's resolve like never before. And it all hinged on the life of a single innocent child. Lyra clung to her father's hand as they walked through the gleaming corridors of the Zorak station. At just 8 years old, she was the youngest member of the human delegation, brought along as a gesture of goodwill and trust. 2 months had passed since the Magellan's first encounter with the Zorak, and in that time, tentative diplomatic ties had been established. The meeting on the station was meant to be a turning point, a chance for both sides to learn more about each other's cultures and find common ground. But as they walked, Lyra could sense the tension in the air. The Zorak guards escorting them through the station kept their hands on their weapons, their violet eyes tracking every movement. Her father, a diplomat named Roan, squeezed her hand reassuringly, but she could see the tightness around his eyes. "It's going to be okay, little star," he murmured, using his pet name for her. "Just stay close to me." Lyra nodded, her eyes wide, as she took in the alien architecture of the station. Everything was angular and harsh, all sharp edges and cold metal. It was so different from the warm, organic curves of human ships. They were led into a large chamber dominated by a massive view screen. Commander Zorgax stood before it, flanked by a contingent of armed guards. The Zorak leader regarded the human delegation with open contempt, his scared face twisted into a sneer. "Ambassador Roan," he rasped, not bothering with a greeting. "You have been granted an audience with the Zorak High Council. They wish to discuss the terms of our relationship. Roan inclined his head respectfully, diplomatically ignoring Zorgax's tone. We are honored by this opportunity, he said smoothly. Humanity is eager to find a path forward, one of peace and mutual understanding. Zorgax let out a harsh bark of laughter. Peace. Understanding. Your species knows nothing of such things. He gestured dismissively at Lyra. You bring a child to a negotiation. This is an insult. Roan's grip on Lyra's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. My daughter's presence is a symbol of our trust and openness, he said, his voice calm but firm. We hide nothing from the Zorak. The commander's violet eyes narrowed. We shall see. He turned to one of his guards and barked an order in the guttural Zorak tongue. What happened next was a blur. The guard stepped forward, his weapon raising. Roan shouted, moving to shield Lyra with his body. There was a flash of searing light, a scream, and then silence. Lyra stared in horror at the smoking corpse of her father, his sightless eyes staring up at the cold metal ceiling. She couldn't process what had happened, couldn't understand the sudden, brutal violence. Zorgax stepped over Roan's body, his gaze fixed on the trembling child. Let this be a lesson, he hissed. Humanity's weakness will not be tolerated. Your father's sentiment has no place in the Zorak Empire. And with those words, he sealed the fate of his people. For Lyra's anguished cries would echo across the stars, a clarion call that would awaken a slumbering giant and bring the full might of human fury crashing down upon the Zorak. The news of Lyra's father's brutal murder and her own traumatic experience spread like wildfire across human space. The reaction was swift and furious, a tidal wave of outrage that crashed against the halls of power on Earth and beyond. In an emergency session of the United Earth Congress, the decision was made. The Zorak had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Humanity would respond, not with diplomacy, but with the full might of its military prowess. And so, deep beneath the surface of Earth, in hidden bunkers and long-forgotten bases, a secret was revealed. For decades, even as humanity reached for the stars, it had been preparing for a day like this, a day when its very existence might be threatened by an alien power. The Titan program, as it was known, was the ultimate failsafe. Massive dreadnought-class warships, each the size of a small moon, had been constructed in secret, their existence known only to a select few. These ships were humanity's ace in the hole, a last resort in the face of an overwhelming threat. And now, that threat had arrived. In a flurry of activity, the Titans were awakened from their slumber. Their massive engines roared to life, shaking the Earth as they lifted from their hidden berths. Crews scrambled to man their stations, many of them veterans of the frontier wars, grizzled soldiers who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. Leading the charge was the UES Retribution, the largest and most powerful of the Titans. Its commander, Admiral Elena Ivanova, was a legend in the United Earth Defense Force, a woman known for her tactical brilliance and uncompromising resolve. As the Retribution and its sister ships broke orbit, Ivanova stood on the bridge, her icy blue eyes fixed on the view screen. She had seen the footage of Lyra's father's murder, had heard the child's anguished cries. It had stirred something deep within her, a righteous fury that burned like a supernova in her chest. She turned to her executive officer, a broad-shouldered man named Khalid. Set a course for Zorak space, she ordered, her voice as cold and hard as the metal beneath her feet. We have a message to deliver. Khalid nodded, his eyes glinting with a fierce determination. I, Admiral, the Zorak will learn what it means to cross humanity. As the Retribution and its fleet plunged into the depths of space, Ivanova allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of Lyra, of the trauma and pain the child must be going through. She thought of her own daughter, safe on Earth, and the lengths she would go to protect her. And she thought of the Zorak, of their arrogance and cruelty. They believed themselves superior, believed they could trample on the rights and lives of others with impunity. They were wrong. and they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. For the Titans were coming, and they brought with them the fury of an entire species. The Zorak had sown the wind, and now they would reap the whirlwind. The frontier defenses of the Zorak Empire were a patchwork of fortified outposts and sensor arrays designed to give early warning of any incursion into their space. For centuries, they had stood as a bulwark against external threats, a testament to Zorak military might. They were wholly unprepared for the arrival of the Titans. The UES Retribution dropped out of slipstream on the edge of Zorak space, its massive form blotting out the stars. Its sister ships, the Vengeance and the Resolute, flanked it on either side, their weapons primed and ready. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Ivanova stood tall, her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the tactical display. The Zorak defenses were already scrambling, their ships moving to intercept the human fleet. "They have no idea what they're up against," she murmured, a cold smile playing at the corners of her lips. At her command, the Titans surged forward, their engines flaring bright against the darkness of space. The Zorak ships, sleek and deadly in their own right, looked like toys in comparison, small and fragile next to the hulking behemoths of human engineering. The first volley of fire came from the Zorak, lances of searing light that splashed harmlessly against the Titan's advanced shielding. Ivanova let out a bark of laughter, the sound echoing across the bridge. "Is that the best they can do?" she scoffed. "Show them what real firepower looks like." The Retribution's main cannon, a massive particle beam that ran the length of the ship, flared to life. A beam of blinding energy leaped forth, crossing the distance between the fleets in a heartbeat. It struck the Leave Zorak dreadnought dead center, piercing its shields like they were made of paper. For a moment, the Zorak ship hung in space, a gaping hole burned through its midsection. Then, with a silent flash, it exploded, torn apart by secondary detonations as its reactor went critical. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in minutes. The Zorak fleet, outgunned and outmatched, fell before the might of the Titans like wheat before a scythe. Those that weren't destroyed outright fled, limping back towards the heart of their empire. But the Titans gave no quarter. They pursued the retreating Zorak ships, hunting them down one by one. Worlds fell as the human fleet advanced, the Zorak's subject races rising up in rebellion as their overlord's grip faltered. On the bridge of the Retribution, Ivanova watched with grim satisfaction as another Zorak world fell before them. She knew that this was only the beginning, that the true test was yet to come. For the heart of the Zorak Empire still lay ahead, and with it, the leadership that had ordered the murder of an innocent child. They would pay for their crimes, Ivanova swore, even if she had to burn their entire civilization to ashes. The Titans pressed on, an unstoppable juggernaut driven by a righteous fury. In their wake, the frontier burned, 1,000 years of Zorak oppression unraveling in a matter of days. And on Earth, a child named Lyra watched the newscasts with wide eyes, her heart swelling with a mixture of grief and fierce pride. Her father was gone, but his people, her people, were fighting back. They were the Titans, the guardians of humanity, and they would not rest until justice was served. The Zorak homeworld hung in space like a malevolent jewel, its surface a mottled patchwork of sprawling cities and industrial complexes. It was the heart of their empire, the seat of their power, and the last bastion of their crumbling regime. And it was here that the Titans had come to deliver their final judgment. The UES Retribution, battered but unbowed from its relentless advance, took up position in high orbit, its sister ships arrayed around it like an honor guard. On its bridge, Admiral Ivanova stood tall, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen as she addressed her crew. "This is it," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "This is where we end this. The Zorak have shown us their true colors, and now it's time for them to face the consequences." A chorus of assent echoed across the bridge, each member of her crew determined to see this through to the end. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to turn back now. But the Zorak, even in their darkest hour, were not without their own terrible resolve. As the Titans approached, the planetary defenses sprang to life, a web of orbital platforms and surface-to-space batteries that filled the void with fire. The Vengeance, caught in the initial barrage, staggered under the onslaught, its shields flaring as they absorbed the impacts. The Resolute, moving to flank, returned fire, its own cannons adding to the storm of destruction that raged between the opposing forces. On the surface of the Zorak homeworld, a different kind of battle was taking place. The planet's leaders, the same High Council that had dismissed humanity as beneath their notice, were scrambling to evacuate, their bravado evaporating in the face of the human onslaught. In a fortified bunker deep beneath the surface, Commander Zorgak stood before a holographic display, his scared face contorted with rage as he watched the Titans tear through his defenses. He had underestimated the humans, dismissing them as weak and sentimental. It was a mistake he now realized would cost him everything. "Activate the Doomsday Protocol," he snarled at his subordinates, his voice thick with desperation. "If we cannot have this world, then neither will they." But even as the Zorak prepared to unleash their final, terrible weapon, the Retribution broke through their lines. Its particle beam, glowing with an otherworldly light, lanced down from orbit, striking the heart of the Zorak capital with the force of a small sun. In an instant, the bunker was vaporized, along with everything else in a 10-kilometer radius. Zorgax and the High Council, the architects of so much suffering, were wiped from existence in the blink of an eye. And with their passing, the fight went out of the Zorak. Their ships, those that remained, went dead in space, their crews surrendering en masse. On the surface, the population, long oppressed by their own leadership, emerged from their shelters, blinking in the light of a new dawn. The Retribution, its mission complete, settled into a stable orbit. On its bridge, Ivanova let out a long, slow breath, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. It was over. The Zorak, as a threat, had been neutralized. But the cost had been high. So many lives lost, so much destruction wrought. Was it worth it? Was this what justice looked like? She thought of Lyra, the child whose suffering had set all of this in motion. She thought of her own daughter, and the kind of galaxy she wanted her to inherit. Yes, she decided, it was worth it. Because a line had to be drawn, a message sent. Humanity would not be cowed, would not bend to the whims of tyrants and murderers. They were the Titans, the guardians of their species, and they would stand tall, no matter the cost. The fall of the Zorak Empire sent shockwaves rippling across the galaxy. For centuries, they had been a constant, a looming threat on the galactic stage that had seemed all but invincible. Now, in the span of a few short weeks, they had been brought to their knees, their power shattered by the fury of a species they had dared to underestimate. In the aftermath, a new order began to take shape. The United Earth Congress, once content to remain on the sidelines of galactic affairs, now found itself thrust into a position of leadership. The Titans, the mighty warships that had broken the back of the Zorak, became symbols of human resolve, their very presence a deterrent to would-be aggressors. On the former Zorak homeworld, now renamed Libertas by its grateful population, a massive rebuilding effort was underway. Human engineers and aid workers, their sleeves rolled up and their faces set with determination, worked side by side with the local populace to erect new cities from the ashes of the old. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the capacity for compassion and generosity even in the wake of terrible violence. And overseeing it all, a watchful guardian in the sky, was the UES Retribution. Admiral Ivanova, hailed as a hero by the people of Earth and beyond, had taken up the mantle of protector, her ship a constant reminder of the price of aggression. Under the watchful eye of the Titans, a new era of peace and prosperity seemed to dawn. Trade routes reopened, diplomatic ties were forged, and the scars of war began, slowly, to heal. The galaxy, it seemed, was entering a new age, an age of Pax Humana, of human-led stability and progress. But not everyone was content with this new status quo. In the darkened corners of seedy spaceports and in the hushed whispers of clandestine meetings, there were those who looked upon the Titans with fear and resentment. They saw not guardians but oppressors, a species drunk on its own power and all too willing to impose its will on others. They looked at the devastation wrought upon the Zorak, at the shattered ruins of their once mighty empire, and they trembled. For if the humans could do this to a species as advanced and powerful as the Zorak, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have? And so, in the shadows, a resistance began to take shape. Disparate groups, some motivated by fear, others by ambition, began to come together, united in their determination to break the grip of human hegemony. They were the insurgency, the liberators, the fraternity of stars. A dozen different names for a dozen different cells, each with its own methods and goals. Some sought to undermine human power through subterfuge and sabotage, others through open rebellion and armed conflict. At first, the Titans seemed unassailable, their power too great and their resolve too strong to be challenged. But as the years passed and the cracks began to show, as human unity began to fray under the strain of an endless vigil, the insurgency grew bolder. Attacks became more frequent, more daring. Human outposts were raided, supply lines disrupted. On a dozen worlds, the specter of rebellion reared its head, and the Titans found themselves stretched thin. Trying to maintain order across a galaxy it seemed increasingly determined to reject their rule. And through it all, Admiral Ivanova stood firm, her resolve unwavering even as doubts began to gnaw at the edges of her certainty. She had set out to bring justice, to avenge the innocent, and protect the weak. But now, as she looked out upon a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos, she couldn't help but wonder if she had simply traded one form of oppression for another. For the Titans, the guardians of humanity, the future was uncertain. They had won the war, but the peace, it seemed, would be a far more daunting challenge. And in the depths of space, in the darkness between the stars, their enemies waited, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. The age of Pax Humana had begun, but whether it would endure remained to be seen. The Titans, once humanity's greatest weapon, now found themselves facing the greatest test of all, the test of time, and the relentless march of history. Only one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same, and the legacy of the Titans, for good or for ill, would echo through the ages for generations to come.